Okay, so I got these 5 questions here. What were the 4 empires that were dissolved after World War One? What was Hitler's failed military coup d'état in 1923 called? What was the Coke version in Nazi Germany? Coke wanted to continue making their Coke product. What was that product called? That continued, was able to, Coke couldn't get its syrup into Germany, so they had to use other products, and then they used a different ingredient and they made a different product. What was that product called? It's still in operation today. Who was the designer of the uniforms of the SS, the SA, and the Hitler Youth? And I guess that's was it 3 questions. So okay, those are 3 questions we can get. Okay, so the 4 empires that dissolved. What was Hitler's failed coup called? And the 2 companies. And then what was Hitler's line about the big lie? And I'll just say this one. So the big lie, Hitler says if you just say a lie and you say it big enough and you repeat it often enough, people begin to believe it. So all you gotta do is just come up with a big lie. It's all about the Jews. It's their fault. I swear it's their fault. It's their fault. It's theirs. It's theirs. It's theirs. Say it over and over again. Eventually people believe it. So that's the Hitler's line about the big lie. Interesting how people, it's like, well, he wouldn't lie about something like that big, right? The 4 empires that dissolved was Austria-Hungary, the Russian Empire, German Empire, and the Ottoman Empire. You had the beer hall push, and the push, P-U-T-S-C-H, is just coup d'etat. It's overthrow the government. So it's the push, the coup d'etat, the golpe de estado. That's what Hitler's failed coup d'etat was called. Henry Ford wrote The International Jew, so he's a fucking anti-Semitic prick. I mean, we all knew that. Woodrow Wilson during World War One, he's a great champion of World War One. Woodrow Wilson is, but actually he had supported the birth of a nation. He said that it was writing history with lightning. The birth of a nation has the Ku Klux Klan coming in and saving the white people, right? The great, glorious Ku Klux Klan. This is Woodrow Wilson. He says that's how the history actually happened, right? Black people got freedom, then they took too much. They was making white people their slaves, and then the great Ku Klux Klan fucking saved everybody. This is right at the rise of the second Ku Klux Klan. There's about 3 different Ku Klux Klans. Fucking KKK, domestic terrorist organization. Right after Hitler, the part that bothers me the most actually about Hitler, when people say he's a smart man, is like they ignore all the crimes that he committed. 6 million people died. He was able to get an entire Christian, regular citizens, it seems like, in order to a fucking racist frenzy. And how was he able to do that? He used nationalism. He uses lots of propaganda techniques. After Hitler, people wanted to do all these social psychology experiments to see why, how, what was the problem? How are all these people able to do such fucking immoral shit? Is authority that strong? Are people that susceptible to authority? And the Prussian education system is 1806, so the education system is teaching obedience to authority. But that's the social psychology, the Stanford prison experiments. That's when you put on a jailer's uniform and you put other people in a prison uniform, then the jailers just have authority and the prisoners just fucking act like little fucking scared rats. Milgram's obedience experiment. If you got a person on a lab coat telling you to shock somebody in the other room because he's getting some questions wrong, you'll shock that motherfucker until he's dead. Because every question he gets wrong, he gets shocked more and more and more, and then eventually he's yelling, I'm going to die, I'm going to die, and most people push that next button. That was actually done for today. Discovery Channel did something like 2012. So the Americans are actually more obedient than when the 1970s, when these experiments had came out. So humans have a penchant to be blindly obedient to authority figures. And so essentially what that teaches me is Jean-Jacques Rousseau, you got to make the people strong, you got to make the will of the individual strong, so that way the will not to dominate over others, but to prevent other people from dominating your will. And so that's what Hitler means to me. Hitler means to me we do not need fascism or totalitarianism. The shit that Hitler, that was the good fight. That is people, there are reasons not to fault the war, but a lot of people came home from the war feeling like they'd done something good. A lot of people, the Diary of Anne Frank, think about the people we did liberate when, that shit actually happened. We're itching for a war. We're imperialist ourselves, and we got racist things going on here. And the Japanese-American internment was a fucking embarrassing as shit, and it was a totalitarian system. So, I mean, I'm not saying that it was all good. I'm just saying that the fight against fascism, the fight against Hitler, that was a good fight. He was a bad guy. He killed a lot of fucking innocent people, and he was able to do a lot of seemingly good people do a lot of really shitty things. So the lesson of Hitler is not he's a smart man, but he's a fucking sick psychopath who was able to manipulate lots of good fucking people and doing atrocious things. People are so blindly obedient they would murder somebody instead of saying, wait a second, no pings in my conscience, and then I'm going to say stand up because these pings in my conscience are so fucking strong, I cannot fucking do immoral shit to other people. I got a moral core that says doing others, you have them doing to you, and you're telling me to kill some Jewish people, and I'm not going to agree with that. And I think we need that. We need that, you know, and a lot of times people say they're just following orders, and you can't use that as an excuse in trial anymore. And so if a person that gives you an illegal order, you have to denounce it. No, I cannot do that. You want me to kill these innocent people? I will not do that. And so that's what the courts have come down to recently. There were 4 empires that ended after World War I. There was the coup d'etat, so Hitler tries to do a coup d'etat, gets in prison, writes Mein Kampf, or dictates. He doesn't fucking write it. He just tells somebody else, and the other person is doing all the writing. So he's so lazy he can't even fucking write his own book. And so this piece of shit, you know, he fails in his coup d'etat, but he's able to get so much publicity, and he writes this book, and he's able to put it all, it's all the Jews' fault, right? The Jews are the ones that ended the German monarchy, and good. Hitler, you're fucking wrong. There shouldn't have been a German monarchy. There should have been a parliamentary democratic system, a republic in place. A monarchy, just because you're born into some fucking family, just keep on going because of that? Fuck that shit. That's stupid. Hitler, you're fucking ignorant, okay? And so, so Adolf Hitler, right, he's a bastard. But you also got some connections between Prescott Bush and Adolf Hitler. So George W. Bush's grandfather, Herbert Walker Bush's daddy. The central charge against Prescott Bush has a basis in fact. In 1942, under the Trading with the Enemy Act, the U.S. government seized several companies in which Prescott Bush had an interest. Prescott Bush at the time was an investment banker with Brown Brothers Harriman, BBH, which had funneled U.S. capital into Germany during the 1920s and 30s. Among the seized companies was the Union Banking Corporation of New York, which was controlled by German industrialist Fritz Thyssen. Thyssen had been an early financier of the Nazi Party. In fact, in 1941, he published a book entitled I Paid Hitler. Ergo, Prescott Bush helped finance the Nazis. An article by journalist Toby Rogers posted on Loftus website makes an even more explosive charge. Another company in which Prescott Bush and Associates had a stake in was a Seals something else. He only had like one stock in, but there was the Auschwitz death camp was involved with it, so he helped finance the fucking death camp of Auschwitz, right? Slave labor charges, says Easy. This is a straightdope.com article. Prescott's involvement with Nazi finance is more complicated, though Thyssen had been ardent backer of the Nazis in the early days. He broke with them in 1938 after the Kristallnacht pogrom against the Jews. He fled to Switzerland the following year. Hitler confiscated his fortune, stripped him of his citizenship, and I Paid Hitler. Thyssen confessed his role in financing the Nazis and denounced the Fuhrer, arrested in Vichy, France. He spent the balance of the war as an Axis prisoner. Prescott Bush, for his part, owned a single share of stock in UBC, the Thyssen Bank, according to 2001 Boston Globe piece. So, did Bush and his firm finance the Nazis and enable Germany to rearm? Yes, indirectly, but they had a lot of company. Some of the most distinguished names in American business had investments or subsidiaries in pre-war Germany, including Standard Oil. So the Standard Oil Company, that's Rockefeller's company, and General Motors, which is, you know, GM, fucking Detroit, Michael Moore. So Standard Oil, General Motors. Critics have argued for years that without U.S. money, the Nazis would have never been able to wage war. But American businesses have always invested in totalitarian regimes. Witnesses our dealings with mainland China. Loftus tells there's more to it than that. He says the value of the German industrial assets in which Bush and his friends invested increased during World War II, in part due to slave labor, and that Bush benefited from this increase when the assets were returned. Supposedly he got $1.5 million when UBC was liquidated in 1951. I buy the claim that Bush got his share of UBC back. It was American Bank after all, but the idea that his German holdings increased in value despite it being obliterated by Allied bonds is ridiculous. That's that guy's position. While there's no suggestion that Prescott Bush, this is from theguardian.com, while there's no suggestion that Prescott Bush was sympathetic to the Nazi cause, the documents reveal that the firm he worked for, Brown Brothers Harriman, BBH, acted as a U.S. base for the German industrialist Fritz Thyssen, who helped finance Hitler in the 1930s before falling out with him at the end of the decade. The Guardian has seen evidence that shows Bush was a director of the New York-based Union Bacon Corporation, UBC, that represented Thyssen's U.S. interests, and he continued to work for the bank after America entered the war. Bush also was on the board of at least one of the companies that formed part of a multinational network of front companies to allow Thyssen to move assets around the world. Thyssen owned the largest steel and coal company in Germany and grew rich from Hitler's efforts to rearm between the two world wars. One of the pillars of Thyssen's international corporate web, UBC, worked exclusively for and owned by a Thyssen-controlled bank in the Netherlands. More tantalizing are Bush's links to the consolidated Silesian Steel Company, CSSC, based in mineral-rich Silesia on the German-Polish border. During the war, the company made use of Nazi slave labor from the concentration camps, including Auschwitz. The ownership of CSSC changed hands several times in the 1930s, but documents from the U.S. National Archive, declassified last year, link Bush to CSSC, although it is not clear if he and UBC were still involved in the company with Thyssen's American assets received in 1942. So George W. Bush's grandfather may or may not have, used employed slave labor, and may not have financed the entire rise of the Third Reich. So, Prescott Bush, they were fascists, they were imperialists, they carried on the war here in America, while George W. Bush can invade Iraq and a country, millions of miles away across the Atlantic Ocean. He can invade, it's a preemptive strike, which is code word for invade. But Hitler invaded Poland, which is an adjacent country, so, that'd be like us invading Canada, which, I don't even know why Russia would even intervene in something like that. We're invading Canada, you're over there, we're over here. I guess by Alaska, you got Sarah Palin, watching, making sure that Putin doesn't stick his head, up there to invade us there. But I'm just saying that if Hitler was wrong to invade Poland, which was right next door, then it's just infinitely worse to invade someone, million light years across the fucking the pond. So on November 9th, 1923, in the fourth year of its existence, this is the conclusion of Mein Kampf by Adolf Hitler, Volume 2, A Reckoning, conclusion. On November 9th, 1929, in the fourth year of its existence, the National Socialist German Workers' Party was dissolved and prohibited in the whole Reich territory. Today, in November 1926, it stands again free before us, stronger and inwardly firmer than ever before. All the persecutions of the movement and its individual leaders, all vilifications and slanders, were powerless to harm it. The correctness of its ideas, the purity of its will, its supporters' spirit of self-sacrifice have caused it to issue from all repression stronger than ever. If in the world of our present parliamentary corruption becomes more and more aware of the profoundest essence of its struggle, feels itself to be the purest embodiment of the value of race and personality, and conducts itself accordingly, it will, with almost mathematical certainty, someday emerge victorious from its struggle, just as Germany must inevitably win her rightful position on this earth if she is led and organized according to the same principles. A state which, in this age of racial poisoning, dedicates itself to the care of its best racial elements must someday become Lord of the earth. A state which, in this age of racial poisoning, dedicates itself to the care of its best racial elements must someday become Lord of the earth. So the best superior race will eventually take over the world. May the adherents of our movements never forget this, if ever the magnitude of the sacrifices should beguile them to an anxious comparison with the possible results. So Prescott Bush, Nazi Germany, pretty much one and the same, right? Very, very little, if anything, maybe Bush is worse. His empire expands the globe. America's empire succeeded, right? It was racist, but how can you really, in 1859, 2 years before the Civil War, Charles Darwin published his Racist on the Origin of Species. The title of it is November 24th, 1859. It's scientific literature, if you want to believe science. It's considered to be the foundation of evolutionary biology, right? Its full title is On the Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection, or the Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle for Life. So there it is again, struggle, favored races, supremacy, white supremacy. Charles Darwin's a fucking white supremacist, racist piece of shit. Hitler's carrying on Otto von Bismarck and a lot of the Catholic churches, anti-Semitism, and it's not so much an aberration as very much consistent with world history. That's Adolf Hitler. Yeah, the Fanta and Hugo Boss and Henry Ford.